Good morning, Robin Miller.
Good morning.
Good to see you. I welcome anyone who's tuning in to Thursdays with Culture Talk. And if you happen just to catch that brief animation, we last week or earlier this month launched something we're calling a Sonic brand, which was a collaboration with one of our partners, CultureTalk Certified Partners, Keisha Lean. So we're just learning how to use that. And I expect to see more of it in coming programs. But I'm delighted to welcome you to the program. I'm delighted to welcome back Robin Miller with Articulate, Real, and Clear. I'm going to give her a chance to tell us more about her background. But just before I do, if you're new to Culture Talk, this is a system, a platform that we have built with the express purpose of making culture tangible. Culture is one of those words that I think people dangle out there. You know, we hear it a lot, but it's sort of like, a can of worms to open, if you will. And in the work that we're doing at Culture Talk, we are really working with people like Robin and her team on the kind of deeper human connection and conversation that can build, shift, evolve the experience of being part of an organization. We are on our Thursdays with Culture Talk program. We've been working through a series of conversations that we call critical paths, and we are in this month of June, the critical path on leadership development. And Robin is an expert at developing leaders. She is a very experienced executive coach. And the co-founder of Articulate, Real, and Clear Communication. She's also been a certified partner here with us for, Robin, do you remember the year? It was pre-COVID that you came through.
It was like 2018,
2018, time flies. So Robin, tell us a little bit about you. Tell the audience a little bit about your background and experience.
Well, I have an interesting background. Sometimes the puzzle pieces don't seem to fit, and yet it is who I am, and because of that, where I am as a leader and an executive coach. I grew up in Oklahoma. I'm the youngest. That comes with its own archetype pattern.
Yeah.
And I have a PhD in musicology, so I study patterns in music. And my caregiver comes up when I talk about having worked in hospital systems and in corporate. So I have received my own 360s, and I have had my own critical conversations, being the receiving end of them.
Yeah.
And now I am a trained, certified ICF coach and continue to explore the world of how do I support individuals, leaders, executives, to see who they are and figure out how they can shift.
Wonderful. And tell us a little bit about Articulate. I know you are a co-founder, and that you're also, Hillary Blair is part of our Culture Talk community as your co-founder.
We are an arts-based company, Articulate, Real, and Clear, and we're really focused on interpersonal communication, whether it's through executive presence, facilitation, or leadership development, team development. So when you have a team not functioning well, it usually boils down to communication. When you have leaders not functioning well, it boils down to communication. So we bring our arts perspective to those environments to help support organizations, teams, and leaders to up-level where they are and actually have a more fulfilling life, I would say.
Wow, even outside of the world of work. Yeah, interesting. And when you say arts, you shared that you have the background in musicology, which I love that pattern reading. That is an archetype, right? Being able to read the patterns. But a lot of the people that work for Articulate also have backgrounds in theater, for example. So
Every person that works with us, and I
Yeah.
say with us because we are an ensemble.
Yeah. Nice.
Everybody has some kind of arts background,
Mhm.
whether it's performing in theater, performing in music, performing on camera, voiceover. Everyone has an arts background. So there's a certain artistic discipline that comes along with that. And bringing that artistic discipline and insight to our corporate partners is what we do. And I would say we do it very well.
Oh, I know that. I know that from working with you all, and also from the kind of feedback and energy you create in groups, and the way they just, shift and change as you continue to do the work with them. You mentioned that kind of the common theme of why a leader might reach out to you or a team might reach out to you is they're struggling with communication. Is that literally what they call up and say, or do they call up and say, help? What do they say?
They usually call up and say, we need better communication, whether it's storytelling, whether it is executive leadership presence, we call it now, whether it is we need to be able to communicate virtually, and we're not doing that very well. So anywhere from medical professionals, Hillary just got back delivering a keynote to Canadian Women in Medicine, to working with law firm. We often coach the Colorado Bar Association. Those people end up in court, or they end up across the table from families. So however your communication shows up, people say, hey, we need better leadership presence, executive presence. We need to be able to communicate better. We need to be able to sell better. So if your sales team needs to figure out why are things not working the way you want it to, we would coach you.
Yeah, neat. And I know it's been a couple of years now that you all have been incorporating CultureTalk's Archetype assessment system in your leadership and team programs. So for those, again, who are new to the conversation, archetypes are just storylines, stories that we all know and recognize really quickly. They give us a shortcut, maybe to understanding ourselves, understanding each other. And what I love about the conversation, Robin's been on our program several times with lots of different insights about what it's like for leaders and teams when they start to see themselves through these story patterns. But we've got a twist on the conversation today, because we sometimes say archetypes is like a gift that keeps on giving, right? Because once you become aware of what are your storylines, what are you unconsciously, leaning into, right? It's hard to unsee those things. But today we want to talk about, as a starting point, Robin, we usually focus on what are our top patterns. So of the 12 archetypes that we measured, I've put mine and Robin has put hers in our titles here. I have high creator, lover, caregiver. Robin has high hero, sage, every person. So those are 6 of the 12 archetypes that we use. And often when we're coaching, we're focused on what patterns are on autopilot for us. But you are discovering that there's some benefit to really understanding what patterns you don't have on autopilot. Tell me about that.
As a coach, I'm always wondering, how can I support people to shift? And shifting happens when people do become aware of who they are and how their archetypal energy shows up and how it's playing into their success or it's blocking them. And then I got really curious. So they understand this, what next? What is there for them?
Yeah.
Well, they have to be able to connect to something outside. It's not just, if I understand my shadow always.
Yeah.
It needs to be, I need a little more of this, or I need a little more of that. I'm going into a meeting. I'm going into a meeting with people that are totally different than me. How can I say what I need to say in a way that they can hear it versus a way that I want and need to say it? And that's the nuance of language and communication that we coach. Because if I'm going into a very high, fun loving, very interconnected, want to talk about what'd you do on the weekend group, it doesn't work very well for me as a leader to go in and present to other leaders and come in with high hero energy and sage happening. And because I can feel the wall just come down.
Yeah, we feel that energy, right? We as human beings, sometimes we don't acknowledge it, like we don't say it in corporate life as much, but like we can read the energy in a room. And sometimes it does feel like a wall.
And we have to be open to it, Cynthia. So if I'm a high hero energy, which I am, and I often coach a lot of leaders that have high hero.
Okay.
And they get very irritated by different styles that walk into their office. Their lives are busy. Their time is measured. They don't have a lot of time to waste, and they don't have a lot of brain space sometimes to waste.
Okay.
So it's very easy for them to become irritated when they realize I need to slow down. My drive with my hero energy is not supporting me. I need to be able to connect with this individual that maybe has high caregiver in their top 3. So how do I slow down enough to actually connect to what is caregiver in me? What's it feel like?
Okay.
I shift my energy purposely.
Yeah.
To then connect with that person so that, it may take a little longer, the conversation, but less frustration, fewer cortisol spikes. And I'm actually humanizing and connecting with the individual that needs to be able to hear them.
I really love that example because you said this leader, high hero, time is of the essence, very focused perhaps on one specific thing. And it's that fast moving energy. And I can feel the irritation. I can feel like, oh God, here comes someone that, like even myself, who wants to connect first before we get down to business. I want to have a personal connection as a high caregiver. But when you say, you're coaching that leader, what does my caregiver feel like? You're getting at that idea that we actually all, regardless of what our top patterns are, we can access any of these patterns because we understand them as human beings. So even that high hero person kind of knows what caregiver is like and what it feels like.
In my past, it's funny because there's a blue slinky that lives in my office.
Okay.
Those old things we used to play with as kids.
Yeah.
And when I had finally reached my limit for the day, I would purposely go and find that slinky. My team didn't always find it helpful because I all of a sudden got labeled as she's in slinky mood.
Oh, okay.
So I connect that to my jester, to my fun, to my wanting to be connected to others through play, and realize that isn't my go-to. It is my release.
Really fascinating. So you can jester, and if you're listening in and you don't know what jester is, just think about the word. It's a light energy. It's a playful energy. It's an energy that doesn't take itself so seriously. And in that lightness does connect, does relieve stress. And it's a beautiful energy that I love the tangibility that you're giving to. I literally am using my hands to play and take myself back to a time in my life when play was more prevalent for me as a child. We see lots of adult jesters too, but I'm loving the example of how did you activate jester because your hero went on overdrive, so to speak.
Yeah, and also interesting, I notice as a leader and when I watch other leaders, that even though jester energy isn't my top,
Yep,
I also access it when I'm stressed in sage.
okay.
And it's not an intentional. So we have to be aware of when are we intentionally connecting to something so that it can support us and support others and what we're doing. And when are we accessing that energy when you're accessing the shadow side of that energy in, how many leaders, including me, can do a zinger or a barb?
Okay.
And realizing one is intentional. It's still existing you, even though you're not being intentional with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've given us a couple of examples. So a hero accessing caregiver, you as a hero sage, sometimes accessing jester, and with intention, right? Having this thinking in a way to get into that. So what are you're helping leaders recognize their patterns and when they need to shift in order to connect, in order to relieve stress, maybe in a situation. When else might a leader want to, because often we think about developing our strengths. And so our top patterns, we're already really good at them and people know them for, we're known for them. But in your case, you're actually asking them to develop an underutilized energy. What would be another example, Robin, of when a leader ought to consider, what about like when they're trying to get to a new level of leadership, for example?
So my brain is going in two different directions with this.
Okay.
I'm thinking of a leader right now who has high magician, innocent hero energy.
Okay.
The combination of that. And they have a smaller team. So think about smaller organizations that you're leading. And you have to be aware that your other teammates that report to you may come to the table with an assumption that now that you have the label leader, that you're able to connect with them around finance, page, and some ruler.
Yeah.
So not only for the leader to realize that, for the team to realize that that's not their leader. And so coaching that leader to say, when you're presenting to your board, when you're connecting with your team, you being aware of what they're bringing, what are their strengths, them realizing that is not your strength, but you have to come to the middle and meet. Try to understand the numbers, try to ask the questions that they need you to ask. So you don't have to develop the expertise, but you do have to develop the curiosity.
And the awareness that this doesn't come naturally, but because of the role that you're in, people are looking to you for that.
Yeah.
Fashion. Yeah.
And if I'm a very, on the other side of this, when you ask the question, if I'm a caregiving individual, if I'm in the numbers, in the data, in the details, and people see leadership potential in me, the capacity, lead others, not just move on up or move forward in an organization. You have to have, as you move up, two things I'm seeing have to exist. People have to be concerned about the organization and the people. You have to also be able to be concerned about the strategy of the organization.
Yeah.
So I might be in the details and not aware at all of people. That as I'm trying to move forward in the organization, I'm going to start receiving critique around that. It's not enough to innovate, to move fast, to get things done. As I move up, I have to be able to see others as well as the strategy that's going to help me be successful.
Yeah, that's actually fascinating because we're now like shifting a little bit, and I'm thinking about when we look at archetypes in quadrants. So just for a moment, give a high level of that. So there are 12 patterns, And we sometimes think about organizing those 12 patterns into 4 distinct quadrants. And I've heard it described before as like the 4 legs on a chair. And those quadrants are stability, results, people and belonging, and learning and growing. So how do I create stability? How do I create results? How do I connect with people? How do I continue to learn and grow? And when you're talking about a leader who maybe is more strategic, maybe they have more strength in that stability results space. Maybe if you're talking about a leader who easily connects and sees people, maybe they have a lot of strength in that quadrant we call people and belonging. Is that consistent with what you're experiencing?
Yeah, this is something that I'm just now trying to notice and digest.
Okay.
As a sage energy in me. And also concerned about, every person's social justice focused, fairness, people, the group is also one of my higher energies. As I work with leaders and I notice they have multiple in one quadrant or another, or if they have multiple in a quadrant and then they have 3 straight across that are equal, and 2 of those might end up in another quadrant. I'm beginning to ask them, where do you find this to support your success? This very strong energy in one quadrant or 2. And then how are you experiencing frustration with others? And how are you seeing where your gaps are now? Because concentrated pattern energy is definitely going to create a gap. Somewhere. And others aren't always aware of that.
Well, just by way of example, so my pattern, creator, lover, caregiver, the creator and the caregiver are both in the stability quadrant. So that clearly is, an area of expertise for me, is creating structure, meaning, stability for myself, for others. And it's an area where I really excel. The lover is in the people and belonging category. It tends to be how I connect. That's like my first go-to in terms of like one-to-one relationship and connection. But the other 2 quadrants, I don't have, my top scores aren't in. I do have an archetype in each of those quadrants. And I can look to, for example, the magician in the results and mastery, or I can look to the innocent in the learning category, because those are my top in those quadrants. But it makes me wonder, like, really, to the gap point, do I have a gap in my ability to actually, create the kind of results that I want? Is that an area of struggle for me, or in the area of continuing to learn and grow? It's an interesting observation and question.
Well, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking about an article that I read this morning where leaders can miss the mark and how they can improve that. And one of the missing the marks is not making fast enough decisions.
Yeah.
So if I'm missing that risk quadrant, that hero, magician, revolutionary quadrant, it might, and someone says you aren't making fast enough decisions, then that's something that I could definitely look at and try to work on. Like, what does get in my way when I'm making decisions? I often hear leadership say, I need people to understand when good enough is good enough and move forward.
Right.
And I was coaching with someone just yesterday, a leader, and he has creator and sage. And I asked, how do those 2 work together for you? But when it came to making fast decisions, not something that individual was doing very well.
Yeah, not known for fast decisions. I can't imagine. 2 archetype patterns that really like to sweat out the details of things. It totally makes sense. It totally makes sense. So I really think this is, for me, in a lot of ways, Robin, I'm hearing like a continuation of the work. So when you first go in and you're working with the team, now do you guys, when you go in and work with teams, you have everyone take a culture talk for individuals assessment,
Mm-hmm.
and then you work with them one-on-one to validate their profiles.
Mm-hmm.
And then you bring that into sort of team coaching, team communication, and then you're also working with leaders one-on-one.
Absolutely. And so I worked with a team recently around innovation and how do their styles support or hinder moving innovation forward, and how can they rely on their teammates, the strengths of their teammates, gifts that they bring to help get unstuck around that. And also with leaders, when am I stuck? And how do I get unstuck?
So in the beginning, it sounds like you're helping them understand what their gifts are, what they're known for, what they bring to the party, what people count on. And then maybe within those patterns, so my creator, lover, caregiver, what are the strengths and the shadow aspects of that pattern? And how do those patterns connect with your patterns and the patterns of other people in the team? But then over time, I am hearing that the opportunity to say, "Ooh, what am I missing?"
Yes.
And stuck is a great way. I love that. I love that expression. We have a question, Robin, that came in that says, how do you encourage people to work on their lower level quadrants? So if you were coaching me, for example, I said, not fast decision maker.
We would, as a coach, I would ask a lot of questions around your process. And then we would look at how, from your perspective, how could we add a little, it's like cooking. How could we add a little bit of the recipe, something to the recipe that would help you feel more comfortable in moving forward with something added to that recipe that would help you make faster decisions.
Yeah. So a little of this, how could you dial up, or so to speak, a little bit of courage in this area?
Yeah. And we're retraining your brain to think differently around, risk can be exciting versus risk can be, daunting. So we're retraining your brain based on your archetypal energies to shift in the areas that you have gaps.
When you just said that too, I was thinking about how often we talk about like our comfort zone and what's just outside our comfort zone. And always, of course, whatever is just out is an opportunity to learn and grow, right? Like anytime we feel a little bit uncomfortable, we're probably learning something new, and there's growth in that process. But I love that you're describing just adding a little of, like, understanding where is the stuckness, because I love to cook and I cook like an Italian. So a little of that, but like sometimes I'll use the word with somebody, if you just dialed up a little bit of that, because you said earlier, we know what each of these patterns feels like. We do. I don't have high revolutionary, Robin. I love people who have high revolutionary, but I love letting my hair down sometimes and going, you know what I mean? I love the ability to object, for example. I know what it feels like when I step into that energy, even though it's not my primary energy.
Yeah. So if I think about leaders, I want to give a challenge to leaders and to organizations. It's scary to not only look at and embrace, where does my giftedness also get in my way? And it can feel scary or be scary for individuals to say, I need to make some shifts. If you have someone to support you to do that, it's possible. And at an organizational level, you and I both know, when I ask people, let's look at your culture, let's look at your organizational culture, to get the leadership on board to say, yes, I do. I want to see if it actually is what we want it to be, what my vision is for it, and how we move it to where I'd like it to be. So not only you as an individual leader, but your organization, it's an entity too.
Yeah. And it has these same energetic patterns that we call archetypes. So just as Robin's using them and her team to coach individuals, you're also then experiencing that as individuals become more self-aware, the team culture starts to shift. But we can also look at these same 12 patterns as they exist in groups, and we can do the same kind of work in terms of, I've talked with a number of people lately who go, yeah, leaders are interested in culture, but a lot of times that when they do learn about their culture, they're learning that it needs to shift.
Yes.
That something in their culture needs to change. And everything we have spoken about this morning in terms of how does an individual consciously with intention shift into another pattern, you can do the same exact thing with a group. It's fascinating.
Yes.
Endlessly fascinating. And the archetypes are, we sometimes say the gift that keeps on giving, because
It
once
does.
we learn the patterns, we start to see things in archetype, we start to experience when we're shifting the wrong way, when we're dropping into shadow. And I love the fact that you're using the patterns to help leaders up level. How do you make faster decisions, Cynthia? How do you get into that results? What does it feel like for you, and so forth? Robin, tell us the kind of clients that are a good fit for Articulate, and where do they find you? How should they reach out?
Mm-hmm. The most wonderful clients are clients that actually want to do the work.
That's a prerequisite.
We work with a lot of sales teams. We work with a lot of medical professionals and lawyers. We work with individuals. I work with global geospace and IT consulting.
Yeah.
So consulting firms. You reach out, you can go to our website, Articulate RC, as in RC Cola, if you remember what that was,
Yes,
articulateRC.com. You can find my executive coaching page there and connect with me, and we can get a one-on-one schedule to talk through what it is you want to grow and develop and see if we're a good fit. But we're here. We want to serve you, individuals, leaders, your teams, your organizations. Culture Talk is an amazing gift that we bring to what we do, and we want to help you do that too.
It's been a great partnership for us. We will also drop Robin's LinkedIn profile and the Articulate website into the comments here. And as we close out, if this is interesting to you, if you are somebody that is working with leaders, teams, or organizations on any piece of the culture conversation, and there's so many doorways into that. Your doorway has been through communications coaching. We know lots of people that get there through brand development, through M&A work, through team development, team building, right? All of this is part of what is it like to be here, and how do we create that environment where people really thrive. We do have a certification class coming up. Our next certification class kicks off July 11th. It's the same program Robin went through in 2018. We did it live then, pre-pandemic, but we have 8 sessions, 8 weeks over Zoom, 2-hour classes. You get to connect with people from all over the world. We're now in about 22, 23 countries. And if you're interested in that program, we're going to drop the link for certification in the comments as well. Reach out to myself, and I am more than happy to hop on a call and share more about the work with you. So we're off to a sunny start in Denver here. After a huge thunderstorm last night and hail at Red Rocks, we're going to take the cool, breezy morning, and wishing all of you out there in LinkedIn and YouTube land a wonderful start to your weekends. Robin, thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia.